Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're posting this on Monday, September 26th. And we would have had it up Friday, but the guy that does technical work for me doesn't work on the weekends. So you would have had it on Friday, but even getting it 3 days late, you're still way ahead of anybody that is trying to follow the New York bombing story via the mass media. Our first question when that bomb went off, when we heard the bomb went off, was how long has the FBI known the guy or guys who did it, and how involved were they in it? And that may seem like an extremely cynical question, but stick around and make sure you watch the end of this video, and you'll realize that it's not so cynical at all. But anyway, if you haven't been following this, bombs went off, police closed off the street, didn't do a whole lot more. They didn't really interview witnesses. They didn't put up posters asking if anybody saw anything. They just closed the street, hung out, and waited. And lo and behold, miraculously, in quotes, the perpetrator, or one of them at least, was found. A miracle. Turns out, though, they knew him. They met him for the first time, or the federal government met him for the first time in March. Well, they say they met him for the first time in March 2014. And his name is Rahimi. And when he was returning from one of his many trips to terrorist hotspots, this time he was coming back from a nearly year-long trip to a Taliban-controlled part of western Pakistan. The immigration people, the customs people, took him aside for secondary screening. Fair enough. They did their job. And in the secondary screening process, they really didn't like his answers that much. So they referred his case to the National Targeting Center. And this is a federal agency that we pay big bucks to every year to track potential terrorist threats. Speaking of big bucks, how much do you think the U.S. pays? Forget the wars, which are costing us trillions with a T. How much do you think the U.S. pays per year to fight the terrorist menace? Just hazard a guess. Well, if you guessed $100 billion with a B, you got it right. We spend $100 billion a year supposedly fighting the terrorist threat. And that works out in 10 years to $1 trillion. That's real cash. And if you take 50 states and divide that number, 100 billion, that gives every state a whole lot of money, about $2 billion. Now, I don't think North Dakota and Idaho need that much money, but let's say they each get $2 billion. There's 1,000 millions in billion. So that would be, what they could do instead of what they're doing is offer $1 million reward to anybody who turns in a potential terrorist. That would provide 2,000 awards per year per state for anybody who provides information leading to the capture of a homegrown domestic terrorist. Do you think they might find a few that way? It's just an idea. But here's what they're doing instead. So Rahimi, he spends his year over in terror land, and he comes back. This is, again, an able-bodied, military-aged man. They do secondary screening. All praise to the customs guys that decided to do that. They didn't like his answers, so they passed it on to the National Targeting Center. They did their job. The customs guys did, at least. A couple of months later, August 2014, Rahimi beats up his sister and stabs his brother. Police come. Dad tells the police, my son's a terrorist. Police did what they were supposed to do, told the FBI. The FBI came in, and what did they do? Here's a guy they knew had been in terror land for a year. According to his father, he was a terrorist and acting completely off the wall. He had just beaten up his sister and stabbed his brother. So what did the FBI do? They ran an investigation and gave him a clean bill of health. Does that sound a little strange to you? Imagine if you beat up your brother and stabbed your sister and had spent a year in terror land, and your own father said that you were a terrorist and said that you were watching, jihadist videos and listening to jihadist talks and spouting anti-American jihadist craziness. Do you think you would just walk away? And you were in jail, by the way, because you tend to get arrested when you beat up your sister and stab your brother, and you were in jail. You think you would just skate away from that? There'd be no problem? And what the FBI said was, well, we didn't talk to him because he was in jail, and we didn't think his attorney would like it. They never talked to him, so they did this great investigation. $100 billion a year are spent on these investigations. They did this amazing investigation, but they never talked to the guy who had this track record of being in Terrorland for a year, of beating up his sister, stabbing his brother, and of being accused of being a terrorist by his dad. They didn't. That wasn't enough. That wasn't enough to go on. I mean, they didn't want to upset the guy's attorney, because the guy's attorney might not have liked it. I mean, have you ever heard of a bigger steaming pile of bullshit in your life? Number one, the FBI has never gone to a prosecutor and said, we've got some extra information on this guy, Mr. Prosecutor. We need you to help us find out what's going on here. We need to put the screws to this guy. The charges couldn't have been that bad, or the trial outcome couldn't have been that bad, because in 2 years he was out and building bombs and blowing things up, apparently. So he didn't spend much time in jail. Has the FBI never gone to a prosecutor and said, hey, we want you to help us put the screws to this guy and get some information out of him? That's never happened in the entire history of the FBI. A prosecutor has never laid extra charges on somebody to pressure them into doing something that the prosecutor thought needed to be done. Do you mean to tell me that American prosecutors don't take terrorist threats seriously? These are all the things that we're supposed to believe if we believe the FBI narrative. Another thing, you may or may not be aware of this, but it's very common for the FBI to go to Muslim families that have immigration problems or even legal problems and put pressure on them to become informants or even operatives. If you don't believe me, look it up. It happens every day of the week. But for some reason, in this case, where we've got a young, able-bodied man of military age who spent a year in Terrorland, who came back, who beat up his sister, stabbed his brother, and according to his own father, is a terrorist. That, for some reason, that doesn't seem to necessitate a conversation with the guy. They never talked to him. They never talked to him. The National Targeting Center had him on their record as somebody who had been to Terrorland for a year. Terrorland, these terror places aren't much fun. Like, you don't go there to get a suntan. You don't go there to unwind. You don't go there to brush up on your Arabic. These are miserable, horrible parts of the world. If you're there for a year and you don't have a family reason or a career reason to be there, something's up. And you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to know that. But apparently the FBI doesn't employ Sherlock Holmes, or they don't employ Sherlock Holmes in this particular case. So we have a major, at a minimum, failure of the FBI to do their job. But it could be worse, because where is Rahimi right now? He's in the hospital. Anybody talking to him? Can't talk to him. He's not feeling very well. Does this sound familiar? This is the exact scenario of the Boston bombing. One of the suspects, who they knew, who they'd been in touch with for years, was shot to death. And the other suspect wasn't able to talk for a long time, and as far as I know, still hasn't talked to anybody, or at least publicly. We don't know what he's saying about what happened. So, FBI, we thought maybe they had known this guy. Turns out they did. We thought they might have had some multiple involvements with him that were a little on the suspicious side. They sure did. And none of this is in the news. Yeah, you can find it if you dig deep, if you read the back pages and you read journalistic outlets that make some effort to tell the story. But they all smooth it over and say, well, you know, there's so many targets, how can we possibly keep up with it all? You know, for $100 billion and for the way these guys abuse the law on a daily basis, I think they could have done something in this case. So we're going to play the video, and if you've never seen this video, it's going to open up your eyes to FBI involvement in terrorist activities in the United States. Invariably, they are somehow involved. They somehow knew the people before it happened. Sometimes the people were informants. Sometimes the people were their operatives. Sometimes we don't know what all's going on, but in almost, and not just a few of the cases, not just half of the cases, 90% plus of the cases, there turns out to be some level of FBI foreknowledge of the individual or individuals involved. So we're going to roll the video, and do spread this around because this information apparently is too boring for the network news to share with you. You're just supposed to pony up endless amounts of tax dollars, in this case $100 billion a year, to pay for the FBI and all these different agencies that apparently, you know, I'll tell you, if you want to be a terrorist in the United States, apparently the way to do it is to go for a year to a terrorist part of the world, hang out, come back, have shady answers, beat up your sister, stab your brother, have your father tell the FBI that you're a terrorist. And if you do that, you can count on the FBI and all this other mass surveillance program in place in this country. You can count on them leaving you alone to do what you want to do. Think about it. Anyway, let's run the video.
Last winter, the FBI was praised for its speed in cracking the case of the World Trade Center bombing and bringing 4 suspects to trial. Now, there is some evidence that the FBI may have known of the plot in advance through an informant and might even have stopped the bombing that killed 6 people. Correspondent Jacqueline Adams has the story.
FBI agents might have been able to prevent last February's deadly explosion at New York's World Trade Center. They discussed secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, but they didn't, according to the FBI's own informant, Imad Salem. Unbeknownst to the FBI at the time, Salem recorded many of his conversations with his handlers.
I'm holding 903 pages of draft transcripts.
William Kunstler represents Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman and several others charged with conspiring to blow up a series of New York City landmarks 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing. That case has not yet gone to trial. Kunstler confirmed newspaper reports of the Salem transcripts. In one, Salem complains to an FBI agent, "Since the bomb went off, I feel terrible. I feel bad. I feel here is people who don't listen." The agent replies, "Hey, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't try and I didn't try. You can't force people to do the right thing."
There is material in here to show gross governmental misconduct.
Today, attorneys for the defendants in the ongoing World Trade Center bombing case formally asked for the transcripts of Salem's tapes.
Quite frankly, beyond me, why now, the 4th week into the trial, we still don't have these materials.
Prosecutors have refused to comment publicly, but legal experts say the defense may have no right to those transcripts.
It's not a defense to a crime to say, if only the government had stopped me, I wouldn't have done it. So this isn't material that ordinarily the defense would be entitled to.
In court today, a witness from the Ford Motor Company linked debris recovered from the explosion site to a Ford van where defendant Mohammed Salamat was arrested less than a week after the bombing. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.